Hello and welcome to Scale Stuff. In this week's video I'm going to be building and reviewing the Revell Snap-Tight 1/25th scale Jurassic Park T-Rex. Very much a kit from my childhood. This is a model that I always wanted to get when I was a kid but never did, as I was always worried I wouldn't do it justice. I honestly never thought I'd see this model up for sale, but then this turned up on eBay listed under Dinosaur Model Kit for the bargain price of £8. Sparing no expense, I knew I had to get it, as I really doubt there are many of these kits left kicking about these days. The boring price scalper in me wanted to resell it, as I've seen these kits go for £50, but money's not everything, and finally getting to build this childhood kit is something I'm really looking forward to. Anyway, let's take a look at what's in the box. In the box you get a large crushed truck base plate, the sprues to build the dinosaur, water washable paints that I won't be using on this model. I've got to check something though while I'm here, as these paints are more than 20 years old and I bet you they're dried up by now. Yeah, they're actually still liquid, if a little congealed, which is, semi-shocking. I wonder what the hell they put in this stuff. The kit also comes with a black and white instructions manual and a NAF brush. A first quick look at the sprues is showing a fairly decent representation of the Jurassic Park Lost World T-Rex. It's somewhat dated now from a paleological standpoint, as the current thinking is that T-Rex probably had lips and these older models were a bit shrink wrapped with not enough meat on them. Still though, it's a fairly decent dinosaur model and front and foremost in most people's minds as to what this awesome dinosaur would have looked like. Fun fact, the scar on the mouth of this model gives this T-Rex away as the buck T-Rex out of the pair in the Lost World movie. According to someone claiming to be the sculptor of this model on an online forum, Chris Howells apparently, this kit was based off reference material used for making the big animatronic T-Rex used in the movies by Stan Winston. I'm not sure how true this is, as you know I can't verify a random post on a forum, but it has a lot of similar features to the Jurassic Park T-Rex toy, which was based off that same material, so it's at least plausible. Trivia aside, the kit has some minor flash that will need to be cleaned up, and from a look at an unpainted version of this model on the internet, lots of gaps that will need filling with green stuff. This kit was first made in 1997, after a brief rebox a year later went extinct from model shop shelves. Anyway, with the quick look out the way, let's get on with a build 27 years in the making. First thing on the menu is building the head. This is a simple two-part construction. While dry fitting, I remembered that this is a snap-tight kit, meant to be made without glue. As I'm an adult now and have proper modelling glue, I've snipped down a lot of the pegs as I'm hoping that this improves the fit. The two halves go together okay. The gaps are smaller with the snap-tight pegs removed, but the model's still going to need filling. On the subject of filling, there's a nasty hollow in the model's throat that I'll need to have a good think about how I'm going to go about filling it, as it's really tricky to get to. Now it's time to add the head to the body. Again, this is snap-tight weirdness. It feels like you're going to need to add too much force and then it snaps tight. Again, I'm gluing the head to the body here though. Once the head's on, the neck area has quite a bit of up and down wiggle room that I'm glad the glue will get rid of, as that would really not be nice to paint. With the neck on the body, you can see more areas that are going to need filling, but I'm going to leave all the filling for one big step. Then it's on to making the tail for the T-Rex. Again, I'm removing all of the pins to improve the fit. The two halves go together okay, but again, more areas are showing that will need more filling. The two tail halves don't seem to want to stay in line, so while the tail's drying, sparing no expense, I'm wrapping electrical tape around them just to make sure everything stays in place while they dry. Despite the problems, I'm liking how this model's looking so far and didn't expect the model to be quite so big. Now it's on to adding the tail. Strange way this kit goes together, but I'm just going to roll with it. The tail seems to fit into the body quite well, but as the internet images foretold, more filler will be needed. Next it's on to building the first turkey drummer sized left leg. This goes together much like all the other parts before it. The fit again is not the best, so more electrical tape to the rescue, With this leg, it's asking me to add it to the Rex now, but I'm going to leave it off to make filling and cleanup easier later on. With that leg done, it's on to making the right leg. Again, easy to make, but this bit has got the worst gaps of any piece so far. At this point, the tape's more damage reduction than exclusion. In all honesty, I'm kind of glad I didn't build this kit as a kid. The gaps would have been too much for me to deal with and it would have ended up looking rubbish. With the leg together, I'm going to leave both legs for a good while to dry so they're safer to handle. Then it's on to adding the body. The instructions would have me add both arms here, but I don't want to add anything that might get in the way during cleanup later on, so I'm leaving them off. The body pieces fit together quite well, but in theme, a few bits want to open up and need taping while the glue dries. The T-Rex is really coming together now. I know this kit's going to need work, but the sculpt is looking really good. Now it's onto the feet. I was hoping for a fit like on the body, but the feet took the crown for worst parts in this kit. Here I'm taping them up to hold them together and adding bulldog clips to the toes to try and reduce the gap as much as I can. There's still going to be a gap though, but yeah, these parts wouldn't fit together properly if they were left to their own devices. Then it's on to the other foot. Here I noticed something. The snap type pegs, even the remnants of them are causing the fit issues, so I cut them off on this foot completely, trimming them right down to nubs, and found the fit was much improved. I wonder if this kit was ever intended as a snap type kit to begin with, or if they were added as an afterthought. Life found a way, but typically I work this out right at the end of the build. At least I know what to do if I see a snap type model kit in future. Remove all the pegs and just glue it together. Next it's time to add the feet to the legs. These have an interesting push in and twist to lock system. The joint's pretty tight but has a bit of a lip. Again though, I'm sure this isn't something that filler can't fix. The build stage is pretty much done now. This is how the model's looking. We have a T-Rex, albeit one where the legs and arms are just dry fitted. Before I do any more work on this model, I'm going to leave it overnight to allow the glue to cure properly. Now it's on to the real work on this model, the cleanup. Firstly, I'm trimming back all the lips on the seams of the joins. Once these areas are cut down, I'm giving them a light sand to rough these areas up a bit and give the green stuff something to stick to. Then it's on to adding the green stuff to the model. Here I'm just filling in any gaps I can find and smoothing the green stuff back and out onto the model to try and better hide these areas. There's tons of gaps in this kit and I'm hoping by taking my time now I can get a better finish on this model later on. With the main body done, now I'm adding the arms. Again, once these are on, I fill the gaps around them. I didn't leave the arms to dry before starting this, which was a mistake. Off screen I added a drop of super glue and finished off filling the arms in properly, without having to worry about them moving around. Arms on, it's time to add the legs. The legs go on okay, but I'm worried about how the legs will fit into the base. Here I glue one of the legs on before adding it to the base to check the fit will be compatible later on. Like with the arms, I added a drop of super glue into the gaps when they were in the right position to secure the joint faster, but there's also poly cement in there which is going to cure for a longer lasting join. I'm going to leave this bit to dry for a good while as the fit to the stand is important. With the legs dry, now it's time to sort out the gaps around the joins. These are the biggest gaps I've seen on the model, but are really easy to fix. The area is just big enough to easily get green stuff in to bridge the gap and smooth it out with your finger. This is how the model's looking with all the gaps filled in. As you can see, it's a bit of a green stuffosaurus. Hopefully, despite this looking pretty drastic, it will aid in the painting later on. I'm going to leave the model at this stage overnight to make sure the green stuff has cured, as otherwise I might move the curing green stuff during painting and end up chasing my tail trying to fix things, like I did on the Tamiya trike model that I did a while back. Next, I'm putting a base coat down. Again, like my other dinos, I'm using Humbrol 237 Desert Tan, as it's a really good earthy base coat, easy to paint over and natural enough to not make any paint look stark. As always, I'm spraying this up off screen and outside to avoid fumigating myself. This is how the base coat's looking dry. I'm going to try my best on this kit to paint it like the Buck T-Rex in the Lost World movies, which has a green back and khaki upper with a sandy sort of off-white underbelly. So first things first, I'm going to get a light green base down. For this I'm using watered down Vallejo green. I'm painting all the areas that will be darker with this paint as a base to act as almost a template. This green should hopefully be a good transitional colour between the darker upper surfaces, and if I leave any of it exposed later on, won't look out of place. Once one coat of this is on, I'm adding another one, but this time watering it down a little less and only double coating it a little higher up on the body so it creates a natural fade. With that coat still wet, I'm adding some Vallejo US Forest Green to the mix and dabbing it onto the model. This green's a bit more solid and more the shade I want the dinosaur to be when it's finished. Then I repeat the process, adding more US Forest Green to the existing mix and dabbing this paint on more. This will slowly change the colour of the paint and allow me to build up the paint in a natural looking way. Also, this is making the paint that I'm using on the model less watered down, further darkening it. Now I'm painting the underside of the model. Here I'm using watered down Vallejo hemp. This coat's really watered down so it doesn't overpower the light underside. I'm mainly using this to put some detail in and blend the darker and lighter areas together. Next it's onto the back of the beast. Here I'm using hemp again. This won't look right as a ridge along its back, but I need to put this on now as the dark stripes will go on next, and this lighter hemp colour won't go over a dark base very well without having to overdo it and wreck the entire look of the model. Now it's time to start darkening the T-Rex down a bit. Here I'm using Vallejo Dunkelgelb. With this I'm lightly dabbing it onto the areas where the darker stripes will be, using this as a base coat and a test run, as I really don't want to mess the stripes up. I'm also dulling the back patches down a bit with this, just to try and keep the creature looking more natural. As a side note, this T-Rex was painted to a backing track of T-Rex the Band and the Jurassic Park audiobooks, which was an interesting combination. Then it's on to painting the stripes. With this I'm using Vallejo Matte Black. Black's not something great to work with on natural models as it tends to get heavy fast. I'm mixing this black paint with water and a little brown to bring it more into a natural range. Even using enough black though, I have to be careful when applying this. I'm applying the black paint thinly in dotting or dabbing patterns to keep it looking natural and a little scaly, building it up in thin layers to give it a better transitional effect so it doesn't look just like it's painted on basically. I'm trying my best to copy the patterns on the dinosaurs in the movie, which is a bit tricky to do as a lot of the scenes they're in happen at night, so the lighting's not great. This model's a bit big and hard to handle, so I left it to dry once I'd done the back. This lets me hold on to the back while I paint the legs on the T-Rex. I'm really liking how the model's coming together now. The black's really setting the greens off. Now it's time to use some BS Dark Earth, because I seem to use it on everything I paint. Here I'm using this to correct the back patches, as they were a little too green for my liking and yeah, not brown enough. I'm only applying this lightly to tone these areas back. While I have BS Dark Earth on the brush, I also really lightly go over the join between the upper and lower surfaces to add a bit of a fade to these areas. Next it's on to lightening up the belly on the beast some more. For this I'm using Vallejo Air Force Light Grey, as yeah, there's a little bit of brown in this grey. I'm only applying this coat thinly, using light brown water to tone it back even more. Here I'm going over most of the belly and underside of the dinosaur, but not going so high and covering all the undercoat, as on the movie models there looks to be a bit of a transitional line along the side of the T-Rex where the green goes to light brown before reaching the off-white sort of light grey underbelly. For this I wouldn't use pure white for the same reason I wouldn't use pure black, as they're both powerful colours and can easily look stark. With the belly lightened, now I'm painting the skin either side of the mouth on the model. Unfortunately, I forgot about filling the void inside the mouth, as honestly I got a bit carried away with the build and paint. Though, thinking about it, this model would have been a tricky fix with all the teeth in the way and there's not really much access to sort anything out. Anyway, with the skin flaps, there seems to be a bit of a fade on the movie models, so here I'm using oil paints and building up a layer that's stronger at the front and lighter at the back. I really don't want to paint all of this area pink on the T-Rex, as I get the feeling it would end up looking like the Joker, with people asking it how it got those scars. This is a really simple thing to add, but it's going to take ages to dry as I'm using oils. Now it's on to painting the gums of the T-Rex. For this, at the moment, I'm just giving the area a coat of Army Painter Barbarian Flesh as a base coat. With this coat, I'm also making sure to get it onto the teeth and, more importantly, into the gaps in between them, so any bit of tooth I miss painting later on will look like gums. Off screen, I also painted this into the scar on the right hand side of the T-Rex's face. Then it's on to painting the T-Rex's eyes. For this I'm using Army Painter Skeleton Bone mixed with Army Painter Demonic Yellow in a ratio of 50-50. The T-Rex eyes in the movie are a sort of ivory off mustard colour, and this seems a fairly decent match. It might have a little bit too much yellow in it, but it looks more yellow on the model than it did on the palette. While that's drying, I'm bouncing back to painting the mouth, getting a base coat down on the teeth. For this, I'm using skeleton bone. The teeth are tricky things to get at, but can be painted if you take your time. Then it's back to painting the eyes, giving them a pupil. Here I'm using pure black. Lining the eyes up is a little bit tricky. When I first attempted this, the dinosaur ended up looking a little bit cock-eyed. Off screen, I had to fix the left eye. The model lends itself to forward-facing eyes like the T-Rex would have had in real life. If I painted the eyes facing anywhere but forward, the front view of the dinosaur would look a little bit goofy. Once the pupils dry, I revisit the eye, giving it a white dot to simulate a reflection on the eye. While I still have the white paint out, I'm also giving the teeth a light dry brush with this. Now it's back to the mouth, giving this area a quick wash. For this I'm using Barbarian Flesh mixed with World War I khaki brown. This is just to give the tongue a bit of texture and pick out a few details. I'm also going over the skin at the back of the mouth with this to blend it all in and kind of keep it on theme. Next it's on to adding some more detail to the underside of the T-Rex. This time I'm using a very thin wash of Army Painter Khaki just to add some more detail to the skin and give the area a little bit of depth. I'm not sure if I will highlight this with a dry brush or leave it as it is. I need to let it dry before I decide really. After it dried, I decided to do some highlights. I'm reapplying US Air Force light grey, this time in a dry brush to pick out a few of the details on the belly. And I think with that, I'm going to call the painting stage of the T-Rex done, as though I kind of want to do more, sometimes you've got to know when to quit while you're ahead, and I'm worried if I try and overdo it that I might end up ruining the overall look of the dinosaur. With that done though, we're onto the home stretch, and now it's time to sort the base of the model out. This base is terrible. The truck's one of the worst modelled things I've ever seen. After a long hard think, I decided it needs to be removed from the model. Here I'm covering the squash Jeep using wood filler. This isn't the greatest of things to use for this, but as long as I seal over it with some watered down PVA, it should stick to the base well enough. Once I'm happy that the unidentifiable Jeep truck thing is buried, I add some sand and rocks to the wood filler to give the slop some texture. I'm going to add some branches and leaves to the base, but I need to go for a wonder to acquire some. Fortunately, I'm trimming a hedge today, so yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. After dry fitting the T-Rex of the base, I'm leaving this mess to dry while I'm at work. I'm hoping the extremely hot weather while filming this video cures that overly thick layer of wood filler. Off screen, I gave this a coat of watered down PVA and a light dusting of more sand just to make sure that there was an even, uniform texture across the base. 8 hours later, the base is dry and it's time to put an undercoat on it. For this, I'm using BS Dark Earth. This base is really thirsty and drinking up tons of paint. While the base was still wet, I added some mossiness to the base. For this, I used Vallejo Dunkelgelb mixed with US Forest Green. I'm adding this water down to the base and just dabbing it on and letting it do its thing. Next, it's on to adding some static grass to the base. First, coating the area in watered down PVA. I've decided to have the T-Rex straddling a path like it's tracking the hunters in the Lost World after Roland's failed hunting trip brings about the wrath of the Rexes. Once that's down, I'm starting to add the static grass. For this, I'm using 4mm static grass as my applicator won't handle the longer stuff. While the static grass is drying, it's time to make some ferns for the base. For this, firstly, I'm cutting out some leaf shapes from green tissue paper. This tissue has been double layered and folded, so I get more leaves per cut. Then, with the leaves cut out, I carefully glue each piece to a thin piece of garden wire. This is going to take a while, but hopefully it will be worth it for the finish effect. "65 million years later, this is some of the ferns. I'm going to give these a very light base coat of olive drab spray paint to hide the wire and make the leaves more uniform. I just hope this works, as yeah, it took ages to make these. The cork's just being used to hold the ferns in place while I spray them, as I'm going to hang them up off the washing line while I do this, so they're easy to spray around without having to touch them, as wet tissue paper is incredibly delicate. While I sprayed these leaves up, I also gave the base a light misting of olive drab, just to tone back the brightness of the static grass, as it looks a bit unnaturally bright to me for some reason. With the leaves dry, now it's time to add them to the base. Here I'm just drilling a hole into the base, adding some epoxy resin, and then carefully placing the stems into the hole. A lot of the stems needed to be trimmed back to fit, as these leaves didn't look right if the stems were longer. With the ferns in place, now it's time to sort out the path. Firstly here, I'm giving the base a dry brush of skeleton bone, just to highlight the texture and stones on show here. With the highlights done, I add some MIG wet mud to the base as well. Again, I'm using this really sparingly, spreading it out from all the naturally low points on the trail to give the mud a bit of interest and make it look like a real path with wet and dry bits. Then it's time to add a few more details to the trail. The first thing I'm adding is an old Boy Scout trail marker for Go This Way, making out that people have been this way and are leaving marks for others that might be following behind them or currently being eaten by compies. Once that sign's down, I dot a few bits of branches around the base here and there to tie it together. Some of the branches kind of look like plants in themselves, so I'm adding them to the base like that. Once the branches are down, I'm adding some tissue paper leaves to the base. Not many, just a few, but yeah, just something to give a bit more interest to the base. With that done, now, finally, I'm framing the base with a black rim to tidy everything up. And with that on, I think I'm going to call this model done. This is the finished model. I really enjoyed painting this kit, and I'm glad that I didn't build this as a kid now, as yeah, I don't think I would have been able to do the kit justice. In conclusion, the Revell Snap-Tight T-Rex kit is an okay model. The snap-tight part of the kit ruins the fit on most of the parts, and the biggest bit of work you're going to have if you make this kit is filling in the gaps. The sculpt of the T-Rex in this kit is fantastic though, and with some work, paints up into an awesome representation of the Jurassic Park Lost World T-Rex. It's a shame that the base on this model is really naff in comparison. The truck, if you can call it that, really looks rubbish, but with a bit of imagination, the base can be adapted into something that looks the part. I really enjoy painting this model and wish that these kits were still kicking about for more people to paint. As for any Jurassic Park fanboy like myself, these kits would make fantastic centerpieces in display cabinets. Which is, yeah, where this kit's ended up. Pride of place on my random models shelf. Anyway, that's my build and review of the Revell Lost World Jurassic Park T-Rex kit. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video and found the build helpful if you're thinking of building or buying one of these kits at home, or using it as a rough painting guide for a Jurassic Park Lost World T-Rex. Until next time though, look after yourselves and have a good one. Goodbye.